The equinox has passed, October has arrived, and nature is starting to respond. Each day is now shorter than the night. And with the plants, this is most noticeable. The colour's starting to change in all of the trees, and you can see this in the ginkgo tree above me. One of the most ancient trees of all, and one of the very first anywhere in the world to start responding to the seasons, responding to all of that change, the lack of energy, the less availability of light every single day. And as a result, it's not producing as much chlorophyll, that strong green pigment which masks all of the reds, the browns, the oranges and yellows. So we start to see all these beautiful colours, usually hidden within. Autumn has finally arrived in Glebe House and Galleries. This season is so obvious visually, all around us. The mountains, the Derry Veigh Mountains, all of the heathers, all of the grasses, the purple moor grass is starting to get a deep, rich orange colour. Oranges and browns are coming out. The purples and the heathers themselves are coming out, and the trees in the lower valleys, we can see them changing from afar. And then right down into the garden here, you can see so many textures, so many different colours. We had many, many shades of green in the summertime, and now we're starting to have quite a palette of colours around us. Must give some inspiration to the artists that lived here, Derrick Hill, and to the artists that now visit and get inspiration from this place. You can see the rich, rich yellows that are left behind once the green has disappeared in these aspen leaves. And of course, each one of these leaves dropping off down onto the ground is its own little packet of nutrition, has its own locked in carbon from the sky, and it will get eaten up by the worms. It'll get broken down by the bacterias and the funguses and all the little microbes in the soil and get completely recycled in this most amazing ancient recycling system that goes on every year on Earth, turning all of this energy and all of this gathered nutrition back into rich, fertile soil for next year. An amazing process happens at this time, which is triggered by that lack of energy, by that changing energy as the world tilts away from the sun, or at least the northern hemisphere tilts away. A tiny little line of cells right at the end of each leaf stalk is created by the tree, and like a guillotine it slices off this leaf, but only after it has stopped producing that chlorophyll, and only after it has taken some of the nutrition back down the stalk, back down the stems, the branches, and stored that nutrition right down inside the roots for next year. And then that little guillotine of cells, it snaps off the leaf and leaves a little scar which heals quite quickly to stop any disease. And of course, all of these leaves taken off the trees, it stops so much wind blow, all the big storms that are going to come in the winter. The wind can run through so much easier. And there just isn't enough light left in the next few weeks for these leaves to be able to benefit. Plus the cold, the frost, the ice that is inevitable, that will come, would damage them too. So down they fall, leaving the tree bare. But for now, for these next few weeks, leaving them very beautiful. All of these leaves that have fallen, all of the buttercups, the grasses and all the other plants that are starting to die off at this time of year get broken down, but they don't get broken down on their own. This time of year is the time of the mushroom. We start seeing huge varieties of mushrooms appearing. Many of the mushrooms are associated with specific types of plants. These birch trees have mushrooms that will only grow around their roots. And of course the mushroom is just the fruiting body. Underneath the mushroom, there are gills. Out of there will come the little spores, the next generation of mushrooms. But really, the mushrooms are hinting at a huge network of fungus that lives in amongst the soil. And that fungus all year round is breaking down all of this nutrition, recycling all of that soil for us. And then in autumn time, when the conditions are right, the fungus pops up these little mushrooms, spreads its spores around. And of course, these in turn end up as food for lots of mice, some birds, and lots of different insects. A lot of the trees and a lot of the bushes have a tactic of attracting birds. Birds that will soon be coming on their autumn migration. Visiting thrushes, like fieldfares and redwings, will start pouring down the valleys here into Donegal, right down through Gartan Lough, and they'll stop here at Glebe House and Gardens. And they'll stop and they'll gorge on these holly berries. The hawthorn berries are already ripe, giving their deep burgundy red colour to attract those birds. And the brighter holly starts to come out now and a little bit later in the year. And of course, inside those berries is a couple of seeds. And the birds will eat those berries, and then they'll shelter high up in the big trees around us. And out through their little system will pass the seeds that they can't digest. And falling with a bird manure, they will plant the hollies, they'll plant the hawthorns, they'll plant the ivies and the blackthorns, spreading the biodiversity for all of the other creatures. Without the birds, we wouldn't have these berry trees. Without these berry trees, we wouldn't have so much animal diversity. Another very beautiful, exotic or non-native tree that the Glebe House and Galleries have is the Katsura tree here above me. And Katsura trees are from Japan, that's where they are native to. But their range is quite limited now. But luckily, thanks to gardens like this, preserving heritage, not just Irish heritage, but international heritage, there are some wonderful specimens to be seen. And this Katsura tree here above us is one of them. At this time of year, at this autumnal time, early autumn, the leaves are starting to turn. And as they start to decay, they give off a sweet caramel smell. You think somebody was baking millionaire shortbreads. There's a beautiful smell in the air just underneath. And they have this rich, reddish, turning to yellow colour. Very beautiful tree, preserved in these gorgeous gardens. The lake levels are high now. Huge amounts of water have been falling in the Lennon catchment. And the Lennon catchment, which drains down into Gartan Lake and eventually flows off past many towns and villages into Lough Swilly and off into the Atlantic Ocean. And of course, all of these leaves and berries that are falling into the lake are adding natural nutrition. And that will help all the bugs, help all the tiny insects, the little invertebrates that live inside the lake. And we know the water quality here is very good. It's tested on a regular basis. And all of those inverts have been growing and growing throughout the summer, eating some of that nutrition, ready for the trout and the salmon that are going to be coming back up in the next few weeks, making their way up, jumping over the rapids through the various different pools and coming up into Gartan Lake. We can tell by the amount of woodland that is all around the lake that there is great protection from any extra nutrition, from anything that is coming out of septic tanks, from anything that is coming out of agriculture, anything that is coming out of business, anything that is coming out of Glebe House and the areas here. It's a testament to the landowners and the management, not just of Glebe House and Gardens, but all of the people, the farmers, the people that live around, the community that live around Gartan Lake, that they are looking after the area well, because all of these trees, all of this shrubbery, it's filtering everything that is coming down, helping to keep these waters pristine. Insects too are preparing for the winter to come. Autumn time is essential for them to lay down their plans and build up the reserves. The new queen bumblebees, the new queen wasps that have emerged out of their hives over the summertime, they are gorging on ivy at the moment. And ivy, an unusual plant because it does things the other way around. Ivy flowers at this time of year in mid-autumn and produces these beautiful little green flowers that are full of pollen. And of course that pollen and the nectar that's inside, it provides nutrition for the bees that will help them survive. The new queen bees help them survive right through the winter. So they will feed on these ivy flowers and they will bury themselves onto the mud in preparation for spring. Already most of the insects, their life cycle is finished. So many seeds are in the soils around us. So many of the caterpillars have already built their cocoons and are preparing to overwinter. And the amazing gardeners of Glebe House, they look after this area in a way they don't disturb the ditches, the little wet places, the little damp places, the piles of leaves. And that gives shelter for all of these insects. So we'll have an abundance again next year. Spiders too have sensed the change of seasons. Spiders have sensed that the days are getting shorter and they're taking advantage of the flies that are still about. And climate change has allowed our summer and our autumn to linger and our insects to still survive. Insects are dependent on the temperature and the temperature is still reasonably warm and the spiders are taking advantage of that, eating as much as they can before winter sets in. And that of course also provides little packets of nutrition for the birds. Both the birds that are resident here all year round and the birds that are visiting on their autumn migrations, passing through the valley, passing through the gardens. As well as the trees and smaller plants in the gardens preparing themselves for the winter to come, they're also preparing all of the animals for the winter. They're supplying nutrition for all of the animals. We can hear the birds in the trees. There's mixed flocks of chaffinches and goldfinches that have been flying overhead. There was siskins down by the car parks. We can hear the robins establishing their territories by singing. And they're all eating as much as they possibly can, trying to build up their fat reserves to get them through the next few weeks. And trees, bushes and shrubs provide so much nutrition for them, like this birch tree. One mature birch tree will produce over 1 million seeds a year. And these catkins have been developing and maturing right throughout the summertime. And now each little catkin produces a huge amount of seeds. All of these little spots in my hand, each one with a pair of wings and a tiny seed in the middle, with a potential to be a big birch tree that could live for 100 years, but most likely will get eaten by the characters we hear around us. Hazel is also producing an abundance of food, which helps the animals get through the wintertime. Right now, squirrels and mice are busy collecting the hazelnuts and putting them in little stashes, keeping them for later on. And the jay, one of our 7 species of crow that visits the Glebe House gardens, is collecting as many acorns and hazelnuts and conkers and large seeds as it can. The jay plants each one or hides each one under a little pile of leaves. And of course the ones that they forget, which can be at least half, well, they'll pop up as next year's hazel trees or oak trees or beech trees. And the hazel catkins that we saw a little bit earlier on with all of their pollen being produced, we saw them back in springtime. This is hazel catkins for next year, giving us a little hint that the world is continuing to turn. So thanks to the OPW, the Office of Public Works, for giving control to the excellent team of staff and management that look after and run Glebe House Gallery and Gardens. We have a wonderful shelter for so much nature. We have a shelter for nature right throughout the year, and we can see all of the different layers of vegetation. And within those layers of vegetation, we have our birds, we have our insects, we have our spiders, and many ground-dwelling animals as well. The hedgehogs are gathering up their nutrition at this time of year, preparing themselves for shelter. Our climate is changing in Ireland. We know that our seasons are getting longer. We know that our rainfall is increasing. We know there's more moisture in the sky, and it typically comes into the west of Ireland along our coasts and hits places like this. But thanks to the gardens here, nature has resilience, capturing lots of carbon, draining huge amounts of that water, and providing shelter for all sorts of different plants and animals, and crucially, importantly, providing shelter and sustenance for ourselves. There's inspiration to be found around Glebe House. There's inspiration for artists, all of the different colours, all of the different textures. There's inspirations for all of the rest of us that want to just wander around, enjoy ourselves and find a bit of peace in nature.